Hello everyone. In this session, we're going to be continuing our discussion of Active Directory Certificate Services. In our previous session, we did the installation of the Active Directory Certificate Services role. We're going to continue by configuring the Active Directory Certificate Services server as an enterprise certificate authority. An enterprise certificate authority would be the certificate server that issues certificates, manages certificates, and that is joined to the domain. To begin our configuration, we want to click on Configure Active Directory Certificate Services on the destination server. So we're going to go ahead and choose that. And then on the credentials page, let's take a moment to look at the different credentials that we will need to configure different role services. We have the standalone certificate authority service. We have the certification authority web enrollment service and the online responder service. In order to install these services, you must belong to the local administrators group. And then we have the Enterprise Certificate Authority, the Certificate Enrollment Policy Web Service, the Certificate Enrollment Web Service, and the Network Device Enrollment Services. These services need the Enterprise Admin Group. You have to be a member of the Enterprise Admin Group in order to install those services. We're going to leave the credentials that we have here, Administrator. I'm going to click Next to continue. On the Role Services page, we already have these services ticked off. I'm going to click Next to continue. And we have now to specify the setup type for the certificate authority. So this is where we're going to select either the Enterprise CA or the standalone CA. And as I said before, the Enterprise CA uses Active Directory domain services in order to manage certificates. And the difference between the Enterprise CA and the standalone CA is that if we install a standalone CA, that standalone CA does not use Active Directory domain services to issue or manage certificates. For this session, we are going to accept Enterprise CA and click Next to continue. Our next task is to specify the type of certificate authority. Now, if you are installing certificate services for the first time, the type of certificate authority that you would want to install is the root CA, because this is the first. And if you're just going to have one certificate authority server, then you're only going to be choosing the root CA in any case. How does the subordinate CA relate to this root CA? Well, in most cases, when you create a root CA, what you want to do with that root CA is to take it offline and allow the subordinate CA to actually issue the certificate. The reason for doing that is that the root CA is very susceptible to attack. So you want to configure that, take it offline, give the subordinate CA a certificate, and allow that subordinate CA to issue certificates to clients. We're going to be choosing the root CA since this is our first installation of Active Directory Certificate Services. So we want to click on Next to continue. We then have to specify the type of private key. In order to issue certificates to clients, the certificate authority has to have a private key. So we can either create a new private key, or we can use an existing private key if we have one, either a private key for the computer that exists on the computer, or you want to select a certificate that you already have and use the associate private key. We're going to choose the first option, so we want to click next to continue. We have to select the encryption algorithm, and we're going to be selecting SHA-1, and we can see that the key length of SHA-1 is listed. So whatever or whichever encryption you decide, you select it. You have the option of allowing administrator interaction when the private key is accessed by the CA. We're going to click next, choosing the SHA-1 encryption. And here we see the default validity period of the certificate. It means that the certificate has a life of 5 years. Now, you can change this, you can make a change here, but you need to be careful, because if you have certificates that were already created and after the fact you come in and you change the validity period of the certificate authority that you are configuring, then those certificates would no longer be valid. So whenever you choose the validity period, make sure that all your certificates that you have configured are going to configure are within the period given for the validity period of the certificate authority that you're configuring here. You want to click next to continue. And you can see the default database locations, system 32 cert log, both for the database and the database logs. Click on next to continue. And here is where you want to select the type of authentication that you'll be using. Your choices are Windows Integrated Authentication, Client Certificate Authentication, or Username and Password. For our lab exercise, we are going to be selecting Windows Integrated Authentication, so we want to click on next to continue. We have here to specify a server authentication certificate. If we already have an existing certificate for SSL encryption, you will see it listed here and you'll be able to select it. Or you can do the second option. You can choose and assign a certificate for SSL later. But remember, it is recommended that when users communicate with clients, they use the secure socket layer protocol to encrypt network traffic. So that's the type of certificate that you need, an SSL certificate. And we're going to configure that later. So we want to choose the second option, to assign a certificate for SSL later. And remember the note given here, this informational note: for this role service to function, you must configure this server with a valid certificate. So you have to have that certificate in order for the role to be functional. So we're going to say choose and assign a certificate later. And here you can look over everything that you chose, everything that you configured, make sure it's right. And then after you've checked, you can click on configure. You can see here the following role services or features were configured successfully. Certificate Authority Web Enrollment, Online Responder, Certificate Enrollment Policy, Web Service. So in this session, we've looked at actually configuring an enterprise certificate authority. This is the end of our session, and I want to thank you for listening.